From the moment Chinaza first laid eyes on her newborn son Tobi, her world transformed into a symphony of indescribable joy, each note resonating with the end of a decade-long struggle. It was as if the universe had finally smiled upon her, bringing an end to years of silent tears and unspoken prayers. For 10 long years, she had endured the weight of longing and the sting of society's whispers. But now, cradling Tobi in her arms, she knew her miracle had arrived. Her mother-in-law, Mama Onyeka, could no longer mock her with hurtful words that once cut deep into her spirit. To Chinaza, Tobi was more than a son. He was her redemption, her answered prayer, her everything. With a heart brimming with love and gratitude, she vowed to dedicate her life to his happiness, for he was not just her firstborn, but the miracle that silenced every voice of doubt. After returning home from the hospital, Chinaza gathered her domestic staff in the living room, her demeanor serious and commanding. She issued a stern warning that left no room for misinterpretation. They were to exercise extreme caution when caring for her precious son. "Listen carefully," she instructed, her voice firm. "I want you to be very careful with Tobi. Do not touch him or scold him, even if he misbehaves. Leave all discipline to me. I will raise him according to my own standards." Chinaza's love for her son was so profound that she wasted no time in dismissing anyone who mishandled Tobi's belongings or treated him with anything less than the utmost care. As time passed and Tobi grew, he became incredibly attached to Chinaza, who was always at his side. His father, Onyeka, was often preoccupied with work, striving to support the family financially. However, by the time Tobi reached the age of 3, Chinaza began to notice an unusual dependency developing in her son. He showed little interest in playing with other children in the compound. Instead, he shadowed her wherever she went, chattering away and demanding her undivided attention. If she dared to sit with Onyeka and share a laugh at one of his jokes, Tobi would react with frustration, stomping his feet, hurling his toys and crying out, "Mama, come back!" In those moments, Onyeka would often scold Tobi for his behavior, but Chinaza would quickly intervene. "He's just a child. Please stop scolding him," she would plead. "Chinaza, you're only encouraging this behavior. He's not a baby anymore. He needs to learn some independence," Onyeka insisted, concern etched on his face. But Chinaza dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand. "He's simply expressing his love for me. Don't let jealousy cloud your judgment," she replied, her tone light. "A chick that stays too long under its mother's wings will forget how to fly. You must allow this boy to grow," Onyeka cautioned, his voice serious. Yet, Chinaza turned a deaf ear to her husband's advice. She continued to shower her son with affection in ways that left even him perplexed. She went to great lengths to ensure his happiness, even if it meant compromising his development. "All I want is for my son to be happy," she would often declare. While most mothers encourage their children to become self-sufficient, Chinaza was resolute in her desire to keep Tobi wrapped tightly in her embrace. One day, after finishing her bath, Chinaza approached Tobi, who was happily playing on the bed with his iPad. She was comfortably unadorned, unconcerned about societal norms. To her, Tobi was innocent, a child who could not yet grasp the complexities of right and wrong. "Hello, my love. How are you today?" Chinaza greeted him with a radiant smile. Tobi, in his innocence, dropped the iPad and began to explore her body, specifically her breasts. "Mommy, what is this?" he asked, his curiosity evident as he pointed. Chinaza smiled at his innocence and replied, "Do you like them?" Tobi nodded enthusiastically, and instead of scolding him, she allowed him to continue his innocent exploration. One cool evening, as Chinaza sat on her bed playing with Tobi, their maid entered to take him for a bath. Tobi immediately protested, crying out, "Mommy, I don't want her to bathe me. I don't want her." She always pinches me. Without bothering to verify the truth of her son's claims, Chinaza fired the maid on the spot, her voice raised in indignation. How dare you call my son a liar? Didn't I warn you to be careful with him? Get out of my sight and don't return tomorrow, she shouted, her protective instincts flaring. That night, Chinaza took it upon herself to bathe Tobi, and as the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. It transcended the ordinary love between a mother and son. They spent every moment together, even sharing the same bed whenever Onyeka was away on business. However, one fateful day, as Chinaza was showering, Tobi insisted on joining her in the bath. Without hesitation, she welcomed him with open arms, and thus began their new routine. They showered and dressed together, living as if they were in a world of their own, blissfully unaware of the potential consequences of their actions. As they continued to share these intimate moments, Tobi began to exhibit peculiar behavior. He frequently pointed out her body and peppered her with endless questions. But Chinaza perceived this as mere curiosity rather than a cause for concern. One afternoon, Chinaza's mother, Mama Oluchi, came to visit and immediately sensed the unsettling nature of their relationship. Chinaza, what is this I'm seeing? You shower with your son. Do you realize the danger of what you are doing? She exclaimed, her voice laced with worry. Mama, he's just a child. He doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, Chinaza replied, brushing off her mother's concerns. You're spoiling this child. This is very wrong, Chinaza. Don't do something you will regret later, Mama Oluchi warned, her expression grave. But Chinaza remained dismissive. I'm tired of discussing this, she replied, her tone sharp as Onyeka shouted from the living room. Chinaza, can you please listen to your mother? By the time Tobi turned 15, the innocent attachment that once seemed harmless had morphed into something deeply unsettling. He was no longer the shy boy who clung to his mother. He had transformed into a bold, aggressive, and territorial young man, especially when it came to Chinaza. His teachers began to voice their concerns about his behavior, particularly towards male staff. Tobi would challenge authority, talk back, and even resort to fighting. He's just strong-willed, Chinaza would say dismissively whenever reports of Tobi's troubling behavior reached her. But this was merely the beginning of a downward spiral. Tobi developed a habit of calling out for Chinaza wherever she went. Whether she was at the supermarket or attending meetings, he insisted on accompanying her, glaring at anyone who dared to speak to her for too long. One afternoon, the family's neighbor, Mr. Namdi, casually remarked, Chinaza is as beautiful as the sun. Tobi, who had been nearby, froze, a dark expression crossing his face. Without warning, he lunged at Okoye, shoving him against the wall. Don't ever talk to her like that, he shouted, rage boiling over. Onyeka rushed out to intervene, pulling Tobi away with a mixture of anger and disbelief. What is wrong with you? He yelled. But Tobi remained silent, his fists clenched in fury. That night, Onyeka confronted Chinaza. Can you see it now? This boy isn't acting like a son. He's acting like a man fighting for his wife. He's just being protective of me. It's not as serious as you're making it, Chinaza replied, her voice defensive. It is serious, Onyeka snapped, slamming his fist on the table. He needs discipline, and you need to stop coddling him. But Chinaza refused to listen. Instead, she continued to deepen her bond with Tobi. As he began bringing her flowers and referring to her as his queen, she laughed and praised his affection, oblivious to the troubling implications. Onyeka grew increasingly frustrated with their relationship, feeling helpless as his warnings fell on deaf ears. One afternoon, Chinaza found herself alone in the living room, sorting laundry, when Tobi walked in clutching a notebook to his chest. His body language was suspicious, as if he were concealing something. He quickly slipped the book into his school bag. Tobi, what is that? Chinaza asked casually. Her curiosity piqued. "Nothing, Mama. Just school stuff," he replied, though Chinaza sensed something was amiss. She chose to let it go, but later, while tidying Tobi's room, her hand brushed against the edge of his notebook. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it, never expecting to find disturbing and obsessive writings about her. "My queen," one page declared in bold letters. "No one can take her from me. I will honor my father one day so I can spend the rest of my life with my queen." Chinaza's hand trembled as she read the words, panic rising in her chest. She quickly closed the book, trying to convince herself that Tobi's love was simply immense and innocent. Despite the creeping doubt in her heart, she clung to the belief that a mother's love could never truly harm her child. Deep down, however, a whisper of fear told her she was wrong. The situation took a drastic turn one evening. Chinaza was in the kitchen, humming a tune while preparing dinner. Tobi sat at the dining table, silently flipping through a book, his demeanor unusually quiet as he stared at her intently. "Tobi, are you okay?" Chinaza asked, her concern evident. He looked up at her, admiration shining in his eyes. "Mama," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is it?" she inquired, wiping her hands on a towel and sitting beside him. For a moment, Tobi said nothing, but then he blurted out, "I need to tell you something, Mama. Something I've been hiding for a very long time." Chinaza's heart raced, a mixture of anticipation and dread washing over her. "Go on," she urged, her voice steady despite her anxiety. "I love you, Mama. I truly love you." Chinaza froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Of course you love me," she stammered, her voice shaky. "I'm your mother." But Tobi shook his head violently. "No, Mama, it's not like that. It's more. You are the only woman I have ever loved. I don't need anyone else." Chinaza's heart raced with panic. She didn't want to believe what she was hearing. "Tobi, what are you saying?" she stammered, instinctively backing away from him. Tobi grabbed her arm, a desperate look in his eyes. "You don't understand. We are meant to be together. You are mine." "Let go of me!" Chinaza shouted, her voice rising in fear. "Why are you acting like this, Mama? I see how you look at me. I know you feel it too," he insisted, his grip tightening. Chinaza managed to break free, stumbling backward, her mind racing as she recalled the notebook she had discovered days earlier. It was just a phase, she thought, a fleeting obsession. But now, as she stared into her son's eyes, she realized the truth was far more sinister. In a moment of desperation, she grabbed her phone and dialed Onyeka's number. "Come home now!" she shouted, her voice tinged with urgency. "It's Tobi. Something is wrong." Tobi's demeanor shifted immediately. He slammed his fist on the table in anger. "Why are you calling him? He doesn't understand us. He wants to take you away from me." Chinaza tried to back away, but Tobi blocked her path. Minutes later, Onyeka burst through the door, concern etched on his face. "What's going on here?" Before Chinaza could explain, Tobi lunged at his father, shouting, "She doesn't need you! She's mine!" After a chaotic struggle, Onyeka managed to subdue Tobi, but Chinaza stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as the weight of her mistakes pressed down on her. In that moment, she understood that her blind love had nurtured something dark, something that had spiraled out of her control. After the incident, Onyeka could no longer contain his anger. "This is your fault, Chinaza. I warned you time and again, but you refused to listen. Look at what you have done to him. Look at what you have done to us." Chinaza, engulfed in guilt and shame, sat quietly on the edge of the couch, unable to meet his gaze. Deep down, she knew she had been wrong, but admitting it felt like a knife twisting in her chest. The following day, Chinaza reached out to her mother, explaining the entire situation. Mama Oluchi arrived the next day, her expression grave as she suggested they take Tobi to a pastor for deliverance. While Chinaza agreed this was a reasonable step, Onyeka opposed the idea and suggested Tobi be taken for therapy. However, Mama Oluchi insisted on taking him to church, convinced it was the only way to address the spiritual issues at hand. When Pastor Emeka saw Tobi, he began to prophesy ominously. This child is cursed. He was cursed by his spiritual mother. He needs deliverance. Deposit 500,000 naira now, or face the consequences. Without hesitation, Chinaza transferred the money to the account displayed on the wall, desperation fueling her actions. Pastor Emeka began chanting and calling on spirits from water, fire, and earth to deliver Tobi. However, Tobi stood firm, fury bubbling beneath the surface. Before anyone could react, he lunged at Pastor Emeka, tearing his priest's robe in a fit of rage. Security was summoned, and Tobi was forcibly removed from the church, leaving Chinaza in shock. After that encounter, Chinaza and her mother took Tobi to various pastors throughout the city, but none could help him. Tobi only seemed to worsen, moving his belongings into Chinaza's room and insisting they stay together. "My son, why are you behaving like this? I'm your mother. You cannot have me. Don't you understand? It's an abomination," Chinaza pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. "Mama, if I don't have you, then no one will," Tobi replied, his anger palpable. "The more you keep taking me to those churches, the more my hatred for you increases. Don't make me hate you, Mama." Chinaza sat in stunned silence, unable to reconcile the boy she once knew with the young man he had become. "If I had known, I wouldn't have exposed my body to him. I wouldn't have showered with him or undressed in front of him. I should have drawn the lines," she thought, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought I was doing him good. God, please save my son. Don't let him go astray." That night, sleep eluded her as thoughts raced through her mind about how to distance herself from Tobi. She contemplated sending him to a boarding school, but deep down, she knew he would vehemently oppose the idea. Things escalated even further one night, when Tobi attempted to force himself on Chinaza. Her screams echoed through the house as she fled, just as Onyeka arrived home. He immediately called the police, and Tobi was taken into custody, leaving Chinaza to grapple with the consequences of her actions. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please consider liking, commenting your thoughts, and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much, and see you in my next story.